The dust cloud behind Willa Zimmerman's stolen mare stretched like a dying breath across the Colorado plains as she fled into the August night of 1876, blood from her split lip staining the collar of her torn calico dress. She had run from Stillwater Ridge with nothing but the clothes on her back and a fierce determination never to return to the town that had branded her a thief for refusing to marry Mayor Thornton's son. The accusation was false, the punishment severe, and when they locked her in the town jail pending a trial that would surely end with her hanging, she knew her only choice was escape. A sympathetic deputy, an older woman named Sarah who had seen too many innocent people suffer, had left the cell door unlocked during the night watch. Willa did not waste the opportunity. Now, 3 days into her desperate flight, with her horse limping and her canteen empty, she felt the strength leaving her body. The sun had turned merciless, and she no longer knew if she was heading toward salvation or deeper into the wilderness. Her vision blurred as the horse stumbled, and Willa felt herself sliding from the saddle, the ground rushing up to meet her. When consciousness returned, she found herself staring up at a weathered canvas tent ceiling, her body covered with a rough wool blanket. Pain radiated from her sunburned face and cracked lips. A shadow moved across her vision and she tried to sit up, panic flooding through her. "Easy now," a voice said, deep and surprisingly gentle. "You are safe here." Willa focused on the man kneeling beside her. He appeared to be in his mid-20s, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of sage. His brown hair curled at his collar and several days of stubble shadowed his jaw. Despite her fear, something in his steady gaze made her hesitate before attempting to flee again. "Who are you?" She managed, her voice cracking. "Kieran Quade," he said, offering her a tin cup of water. "I found you about 5 miles east of here. Your horse was in bad shape. I have been tending to both of you for the past day and night." Willa accepted the water, drinking slowly as he had instructed with a gentle gesture. Her mind raced, trying to assess this stranger. He wore typical cowboy attire, dusty trousers and a worn shirt, but something about his manner suggested education and refinement beyond what she expected to find in this remote territory. "Where am I?" she asked. "About 20 miles north of Westcliffe, Colorado. I have a small ranch nearby." "Well, calling it a ranch is generous. More like a piece of land with ambitions." A slight smile touched his lips, but his eyes remained serious. "What were you running from?" Willa's hand instinctively went to her neck, where bruises from the deputy's rough handling still marked her skin. Kieran's expression darkened when he saw them. "I did not do what they accused me of," she said quietly. "But the truth did not matter in Stillwater Ridge. The mayor's son wanted to marry me, and when I refused, suddenly money went missing from the general store where I worked. They were going to hang me." She watched his face carefully, expecting disbelief or worse, the calculation of someone considering the reward for returning a fugitive. Instead, Kieran nodded slowly. "Stillwater Ridge has a reputation," he said. "I passed through there once about 3 years ago. Felt like a town where justice bent toward whoever had the most money." He stood, moving to a small camp stove where coffee was warming. "You are welcome to stay here until you figure out your next move, but I should tell you, my place is not much. I have been working to build something, but it is slow going alone." "Why would you help me?" Willa asked, suspicious despite her desperate situation. "You do not know me. I could be exactly what they said I was." Kieran poured coffee into 2 cups, bringing one to her. "My mother was accused of theft back in Pennsylvania when I was 16. She worked as a seamstress for a wealthy family, and when the lady of the house lost an expensive brooch, she blamed my mother. They fired her without references, and we lost everything." We came west to start over, but she died of pneumonia that first winter. I learned then that accusations do not need truth behind them, just power." The pain in his voice was real, and Willa felt something in her chest loosen. She sipped the coffee, letting its warmth spread through her. "I am Willa Zimmerman," she said. "I have been running for 3 days. I do not know where I was heading, just away." "Westcliffe is a good town," Kieran offered, settling onto a stool near her makeshift bed. "Nothing like Stillwater Ridge. The people there believe in fair treatment. They have a woman on the town council, which is almost unheard of. The sheriff is honest, and the judge actually listens to both sides of a story." "It sounds too good to be true," Willa said, but she heard the hope creeping into her own voice. "This town will treat you like royalty," Kieran said with more confidence. "Well, maybe not royalty exactly, but with respect and fairness. I sell cattle there twice a month. The community is growing, and they are always looking for honest workers. A woman with your courage could build a good life there." Over the next 3 days, Willa's strength returned. Kieran's camp sat in a small valley with a creek running through it, surrounded by grassland that rolled toward distant mountains. He had built a modest cabin, barely more than 1 room, and kept a string of about 30 cattle that he hoped to expand into a proper herd. He worked from dawn until dusk, checking fences, tending animals, and slowly building his dream. Willa insisted on helping despite his protests. She cooked their meals, mended his shirts with needle and thread from his sparse supplies, and even helped him repair a section of damaged fence. The work felt good after days of fear and running. More than that, she found herself drawn to Kieran's quiet determination and fundamental decency. On the 4th evening, as they sat by the fire watching stars emerge in the vast Colorado sky, Kieran told her more about Westcliffe. "The town sits in the wet mountain valley," he explained, his voice taking on an animated quality she had not heard before. "The Sangre de Cristo Mountains rise up to the west like cathedral walls. In the morning, when the sun hits them, they glow red, which is how they got their name. The town itself is only a few years old, but it is growing fast. They have a newspaper, 3 churches, a real doctor, and a school that just hired its 2nd teacher." "You speak about it like you wish you lived there instead of out here," Willa observed. Kieran poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling upward. "Sometimes I think about it. But this land, this dream of building something with my own hands, it is what I came west for. My mother and we planned this together. She wanted to see wide, open spaces, wanted to breathe air that did not smell like factory smoke. Living in town feels like giving up on that dream." "Or maybe it is adapting the dream," Willa suggested softly. "She would want you to be happy, not alone." Their eyes met across the fire, and something passed between them, an understanding that went beyond words. Kieran looked away first, clearing his throat. "Tomorrow, I will take you into Westcliffe," he said. "You can meet some people, see if it feels right to you. If you decide to stay, I know the woman who runs the boarding house, Mrs. Patricia Henderson. She is always looking for help, and she does not pry into people's pasts." Willa nodded, but a strange reluctance filled her. These few days with Kieran had been the first peace she had known in months. His presence made her feel safe in a way she had not experienced since her parents died 5 years ago. The thought of leaving his camp, of being on her own again in a strange town, filled her with anxiety. That night, sleeping in the tent Kieran had insisted she use while he slept under the stars, Willa admitted to herself what she had been avoiding. She was falling for this quiet cowboy who had saved her life and asked for nothing in return. His kindness was not a transaction. His help came without conditions. And when he smiled, which was rare but genuine, She felt warmth spread through her entire body. The ride into Westcliffe took most of the morning. Willa sat behind Kieran on his sturdy roan gelding, her arms wrapped around his waist, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing. The landscape transformed as they traveled, the grasslands giving way to rolling hills dotted with pine trees. True to Kieran's description, the Sangre de Cristo Mountains rose up magnificent and imposing, their peaks still holding snow despite the August heat. Westcliffe appeared almost suddenly, nestled in the valley like a promise. The main street was wide and well-maintained, lined with false front buildings painted in cheerful colors. Willa counted a mercantile, a bank, a hotel, 2 saloons, a smithy, a doctor's office, and various other establishments that spoke of a thriving community. People moved along the wooden sidewalks with purpose, but without the tension she had always felt in Stillwater Ridge. Kieran guided the horse to a 2-story white house with a wraparound porch and a sign that read, "Henderson Boarding House." A woman emerged before they could dismount, wiping her hands on her apron. She appeared to be in her 50s, with graying hair pulled back in a sensible bun and shrewd but kind eyes. "Kieran Quade," she called out. "I was not expecting you until next week." "Hello, Mrs. Henderson," Kieran replied, helping Willa down from the horse before dismounting himself. "I brought someone who might be interested in that position you mentioned last month. This is Willa Zimmerman, Mrs. Henderson's eyes swept over Willa, taking in her worn dress, the fading bruises on her neck, and the wary set of her shoulders. But instead of judgment, her expression softened with understanding. "Come inside, dear," she said. "You look like you could use a proper meal and perhaps some tea." "Kieran, you are welcome too, of course." The interior of the boarding house was clean and comfortable, with lace curtains on the windows and the smell of fresh bread in the air. Mrs. Henderson led them to a kitchen table and began preparing tea while Willa and Kieran sat down. "I run a respectable house," Mrs. Henderson began, addressing Willa directly. "I have 6 rooms upstairs, currently all occupied by decent working people. I provide breakfast and dinner, and I keep the place clean. What I need is help with the cooking, the laundry, and general upkeep. In exchange, I offer room, board, and a small wage. Nothing fancy, but honest work." "I am a hard worker," Willa said, finding her voice. "I can cook and clean. I worked in a general store for 3 years, so I know how to manage accounts if you need that too." "Running from something, Mrs. Henderson asked bluntly but not unkindly. Willa glanced at Kieran, who gave her an encouraging nod. She took a breath and decided on honesty. "Yes, madam. I was falsely accused of theft in my previous town. I did not do what they claimed, but staying would have meant hanging. So I ran." Mrs. Henderson poured the tea, her face thoughtful. "Westcliffe has its share of people starting over. I am one of them. Came here after my husband died, needed a place where I could support myself without people whispering about the widow Henderson. I believe in second chances, but I also believe in honesty. If you are telling me the truth, we will get along fine. If you are lying, I will know soon enough and you will leave my house immediately. Are we clear?" "Yes, madam," Willa said. "I am telling the truth. Then you can start tomorrow. I will show you your room after we finish here." Relief flooded through Willa so intensely that her eyes stung with tears. A job, a place to stay, a chance to rebuild her life. It seemed impossible after everything that had happened. Kieran smiled at her, and she saw pride in his expression. "I told you Westcliffe was different," he said softly. After tea, Mrs. Henderson showed Willa to a small room on the 2nd floor. It was simple but clean, with a bed, a washstand, a small wardrobe, and a window overlooking the street. To Willa, it looked like paradise. "I need to pick up some supplies," Kieran said when they returned downstairs. "Willa, Would you like to walk with me? I can introduce you to more of the town." They strolled down the main street together, and Willa felt the curious but not hostile glances from passers-by. Kieran seemed to know everyone, greeting people by name and receiving warm responses in return. He introduced her to Thomas Wright, who owned the mercantile, to Dr. Samuel Foster, to Sheriff Jake Morrison, a man in his 40s with a calm demeanor and sharp eyes. "Heard you found yourself some help out at your place," the sheriff said to Kieran, his gaze moving to Willa. "Miss Zimmerman will be working at the Henderson place," Kieran corrected quickly. "I just happened to find her when her horse went lame." "Welcome to Westcliffe," Sheriff Morrison said to Willa. "We are a peaceful town, mostly. We take care of our own here." There was a question in his words, an offer of protection if needed. Willa felt her throat tighten with gratitude. "Thank you, Sheriff. I hope to become part of this community." As the day wore on, Willa met more residents. She spoke with Margaret Holloway, the woman on the town council Kieran had mentioned, who ran the town's newspaper and was working to establish a library. She met other women who worked in various businesses, who owned property, who spoke their minds freely. This was indeed a different kind of Western town, one where the usual rules seemed more flexible. By the time Kieran prepared to ride back to his ranch, the sun was beginning its descent toward the mountains. They stood together outside the boarding house, and Willa found herself reluctant to say goodbye. "Thank you," she said, the words inadequate for everything he had done. "You saved my life, Kieran. I will never forget that." "You saved yourself," he replied. "You had the courage to run, to fight for your life. I just provided a little water and rest." He paused, shifting his weight. "I come into town twice a month for supplies. Maybe I could stop by, see how you are settling in." "I would like that," Willa said, her heart lifting. "I would like that very much." Their fingers brushed as they said goodbye, a touch that lingered a moment longer than necessary. Willa watched him ride away until he disappeared from view, already counting the days until she might see him again. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of work and adjustment. Mrs. Henderson proved to be a fair employer, demanding but reasonable. The boarding house residents were a varied group, including a school teacher named Anna, a bank clerk named Robert, a surveyor named Christopher who was mapping the valley, and 2 brothers who worked at the sawmill. They all treated Willa with courtesy, and gradually she felt the constant tension she had carried begin to ease. She learned the rhythms of Westcliffe, the way the town woke with the sunrise and settled into quieter pursuits after dinner. She attended church on Sunday, sitting with Mrs. Henderson and feeling the comfort of ritual and community. She walked the streets in the evening, marveling at the mountains that turned purple and gold as the sun set. But through it all, she thought of Kieran. She wondered what he was doing at his ranch, whether he was eating properly, if he was lonely. At night, lying in her small room, she replayed their conversations, the way he had looked at her across the campfire, the gentleness in his hands when he had helped her drink water that first day. When Kieran finally returned to town, appearing at the boarding house door on a Saturday afternoon, Willa's heart jumped at the sight of him. He had cleaned up, shaving and wearing what must be his best shirt, though it was still worn at the collar. "I was hoping you might have time to walk with me," he said, holding his hat in his hands. "If Mrs. Henderson can spare you for a bit." "Go on," Mrs. Henderson said from behind Willa, a knowing smile on her face. "You have been working hard. Take a few hours." They walked to the edge of town, where a path led toward the creek that fed into the valley. The late August afternoon was warm but not oppressive, with a breeze carrying the scent of pine from the mountains. "How have you been?" Kieran asked. "Really good," Willa said, and meant it. "Mrs. Henderson is kind and the work is honest. I feel safe here. No one asks questions about where I came from or why, they just accept me." She paused. "I cannot thank you enough for bringing me here." "You seem happy," Kieran observed. "That is all I wanted." They walked in comfortable silence for a while, following the creek upstream. Finally, Willa worked up the courage to ask what had been on her mind. "How is the ranch? Are you managing all right on your own?" Kieran was quiet for a long moment. "It is harder than I expected," he admitted. "Not the physical work, I can handle that, but the isolation gets to me more than I thought it would. Coming into town, seeing people, talking to you right now, it reminds me how much I have been missing human connection." "You could hire help," Willa suggested. "There must be cowboys looking for work." "Maybe," Kieran said. "But I keep thinking about what you said, about adapting the dream rather than abandoning it. I have been wondering if maybe my mother's dream was not about the specific place, but about building a life that felt free and hopeful. Maybe that could happen in town as much as on a ranch." Willa's pulse quickened. "What are you saying?" Kieran stopped walking, turning to face her. The creek burbled beside them, and afternoon light filtered through the cottonwood trees, dappling his face. "I am saying that since I met you, since I watched you fight to survive and then thrive here in Westcliffe, I have been thinking maybe it is time to change my plans. The land I have, I could lease it for grazing. That would bring in some income. And here in town, they need someone to manage the livery stable. Old Mr. Carson is retiring and the job comes with a small house behind the stable. It would not be ranching, but it would be working with horses and cattle, and it would be here." "Here," Willa repeated softly. "In Westcliffe." "Near you," Kieran said, his voice dropping. "If that is something you might want." Willa felt tears prick her eyes, but they were tears of joy. "I have been thinking about you every day," she confessed. "Wondering if you were all right, wishing I could see you, talk to you. When I saw you at the door today, I felt happier than I have in years." Kieran reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. When she did not, he cupped her face gently in his calloused hands. "I think I started falling for you that first day, when you woke up scared and hurt, but still had the fire in your eyes to ask who I was and why you should trust me. You are the strongest, bravest person I have ever met, Willa Zimmerman. I fell for you because you saw me at my worst and still treated me like I mattered," Willa whispered. "You gave me back my life, Kieran." Their first kiss was soft and tentative, a question and an answer all at once. Willa felt something broken inside her begin to heal, felt hope take root where only fear had lived. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. "So you will come to Westcliffe?" she asked. "You will take the livery job?" "I will talk to Mr. Carson on Monday," Kieran promised. "If he agrees, I will be here within the month." They walked back to town holding hands, talking about the future in a way Willa had not dared to dream was possible. By the time they reached the boarding house, they had made plans for Kieran to attend church with her the next day, to have dinner at the boarding house that evening, to spend as much time together as possible before he had to return to his ranch. True to his word, Kieran met with Mr. Carson that Monday. The old man was relieved to find someone trustworthy to take over the livery, which he had run for 15 years. They agreed on terms, and Kieran spent the next 3 weeks preparing for the transition. He sold half his cattle, leased his land to a larger rancher who had been eyeing the water rights, and packed up his small cabin. During those weeks, Kieran came to town every few days, and each visit deepened the connection between him and Willa. They went on long walks, attended town socials together, and talked for hours about everything from their childhoods to their hopes for the future. Willa learned that Kieran loved poetry, could play the harmonica, and had a dry sense of humor that caught her by surprise and made her laugh. Kieran discovered that Willa was fiercely intelligent, had a gift for mathematics, and could quote entire passages from the novels she had read. The physical attraction between them grew as well. Innocent touches became lingering caresses. Kisses grew more passionate. They maintained propriety, aware that the town was watching, but the desire between them was palpable. Mrs. Henderson, ever perceptive, pulled Willa aside one evening after Kieran had left following dinner. "That young man is in love with you," she said, "and you are in love with him. I have seen enough couples in my years to recognize the real thing." Willa blushed. "Is it too soon? We have only known each other 6 weeks." "When you know," Mrs. Henderson said. "My Henry proposed after 3 weeks, and we had 25 happy years together before the fever took him. Time is not what matters. What matters is trust, respect, and commitment. Do you trust him?" "With my life," Willa said without hesitation. "Then do not waste time questioning it. Life is too short and too uncertain, especially out here." In early October, Kieran moved to Westcliffe permanently. The house behind the livery was small but well built, with 2 rooms and a fireplace. Kieran threw himself into his new role, caring for the horses and wagons of townspeople, offering fair prices, and quickly earning a reputation for honest dealing. On a crisp October evening, as golden aspen leaves danced through the streets, Kieran invited Willa to see his new home. She came after finishing her work at the boarding house, her heart racing with anticipation and nervousness. The house was sparse but clean. Kieran had made an effort, she could see, placing wildflowers in a jar on the rough-hewn table, sweeping the floor, making sure the fire was burning warmly. "It is not much," he said, suddenly seeming unsure of himself. "But it could be a good home with the right person to share it." Willa turned to him, seeing the vulnerability in his eyes. This strong, capable man who had saved her life was opening his heart completely, taking a risk as great as any she had taken when she fled Stillwater Ridge. "Are you asking me something, Kieran Quade?" she said softly. He took both her hands in his. "Willa Zimmerman, I know we have not known each other long by some standards, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. You are the other half of my soul. When I am with you, everything makes sense. When we are apart, I am counting the minutes until I see you again. I love you. I want to build a life with you, have a family with you, grow old with you. Will you marry me?" Joy exploded through Willa's chest. "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, Kieran, I will marry you. I love you so much." They came together in a fierce embrace, kissing with all the pent-up passion of the past weeks. Willa felt Kieran's hands in her hair, felt her own fingers clutching his shirt, pulling him closer. The kiss deepened, and she felt heat building between them, desire that had been carefully controlled now threatening to overwhelm them both. Kieran pulled back slightly, his breathing ragged. "I want you so badly," he said, his voice rough. "But I want to do this right. I want you to be my wife first." Willa nodded, though her body protested. "How soon can we arrange it?" Kieran laughed, relief and joy in the sound. "I will speak to Reverend Thomas tomorrow. If you agree, we could marry next Sunday. Is that too fast?" "It is not fast enough," Willa said, kissing him again. The next week passed in a flurry of preparation. Mrs. Henderson insisted on making Willa's wedding dress, a simple but elegant creation of cream-colored cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs. The other residents of the boarding house contributed what they could. Anna, the schoolteacher, lent Willa a pair of pearl earrings. The surveyor Christopher offered to play his violin during the ceremony. The Sawmill brothers built a beautiful wooden hope chest as a gift. The whole town seemed invested in the wedding. Margaret Holloway wrote a notice for the newspaper celebrating the union. The mercantile owner, Mr. Wright, donated fabric for curtains for the little house. Even Sheriff Morrison stopped by to wish them well, pressing a silver dollar into Kieran's hand for luck. On Sunday morning, October 15th, 1876, Willa stood in her small room at the boarding house and looked at herself in the mirror. The woman staring back at her bore little resemblance to the desperate fugitive who had collapsed in the desert 2 months ago. This woman had clear eyes, healthy skin, and most importantly, hope lighting her face from within. Mrs. Henderson came to get her when it was time. "You look beautiful, dear," she said, her eyes misting. "I am so happy for you." The church was full, with what seemed like the entire town of Westcliffe crammed into the pews. Willa walked down the aisle alone, but she did not feel alone. She felt the support and acceptance of this community that had welcomed her without question. And at the front of the church, waiting for her with love shining in his eyes, stood Kieran. He wore a new suit, probably purchased with money he should have saved, but he looked handsome and strong and utterly devoted. Reverend Thomas performed the ceremony with warmth and sincerity. When it came time for the vows, Kieran's voice was steady and sure. "I, Kieran Quade, take you, Willa Zimmerman, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love you, honor you, protect you, and stand by your side through whatever trials life brings us. You saved me from loneliness and gave my life meaning. I will spend every day trying to make you as happy as you have made me." Willa's own vows came from her heart. "I, Willa Zimmerman, take you, Kieran Quade, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to love you, honor you, support you, and build a life with you filled with joy and purpose. You saved my life, and then you gave me a reason to live it fully. I will love you until my last breath and beyond." When Reverend Thomas pronounced them husband and wife, Kieran's kiss was gentle and reverent, a promise of all the kisses to come. The congregation erupted in applause and cheers. The celebration afterward took place at the town hall, with tables laden with food contributed by various families. There was music and dancing, laughter and toasts. Willa danced with Kieran, then with Mr. Carson, then with Sheriff Morrison, then with Kieran again. She felt like she was floating, like this happiness could not be real, but it was real. When evening came and they finally left the celebration to walk to their home, Kieran lifted her in his arms to carry her over the threshold. And the solid warmth of his body, the strength of his arms, the love in his eyes, all of it was gloriously, perfectly real. Inside their small house, with the fire burning low and the door closed against the world, they finally gave in to the desire that had been building for months. Kieran undressed her slowly, reverently, kissing each new bit of exposed skin. Willa helped him remove his own clothes, marveling at the lean strength of his body. Their lovemaking was tender and passionate, awkward and perfect, a joining of not just bodies but souls. Afterward, lying in each other's arms in the narrow bed, Willa felt a peace she had never known. "I love you, Mrs. Quade," Kieran whispered against her hair. "I love you, Mr. Quade," she whispered back, and knew she would say those words every day for the rest of her life. The first year of their marriage was one of adjustment and joy. Willa continued working at the boarding house for a while, wanting to save money and also reluctant to leave Mrs. Henderson without help. But as winter set in and she discovered she was pregnant, she transitioned to working from home, taking in mending and doing bookkeeping for several local businesses. Kieran thrived in his role at the livery. His fair dealing and good work earned him steady business, and he saved carefully, planning for the future. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, Willa sewing or working on accounts while Kieran read aloud from newspapers or books borrowed from the small library Margaret Holloway had finally established. The pregnancy was not easy. Willa suffered from terrible morning sickness through the first months, and as she grew larger, The simple tasks of daily life became challenging. But Kieran was attentive and supportive, taking on more of the household chores without complaint, making sure she rested, worrying over her with endearing intensity. On a stormy May evening in 1877, Willa went into labor. Mrs. Henderson came to help, along with Dr. Foster, and Kieran paced outside the bedroom, praying and worrying. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. More than once, Dr. Foster's expression grew grave, and Kieran felt fear grip his heart. But Willa was as strong as ever, and finally, on May 16th, their son was born. They named him Samuel Henry Quade, after the doctor who delivered him and Mrs. Henderson's late husband. The baby had Kieran's sage green eyes and Willa's dark hair, and from the moment Kieran held him, he was utterly lost in love. Fatherhood transformed Kieran in ways he had not expected. The responsibility of caring for this tiny, vulnerable life made him more cautious in his work, more careful with money, more grateful for the stable community they had built around them. He would rush home from the livery just to hold Samuel, to watch him sleep, to marvel at every small change and development. Willa blossomed as a mother, despite her initial fears that she would not know what to do. She was patient and loving, and she loved watching Kieran with their son, seeing the gentleness this strong man showed to the baby. As Samuel grew from infant to toddler, the Quade family became a fixture in Westcliffe. They attended church every Sunday, participated in town events, hosted dinners for friends. Kieran joined the volunteer fire brigade, and Willa became involved in Margaret Holloway's efforts to improve the school. In the evenings, after Samuel was asleep, Kieran and Willa would sit on the small porch they had added to their house, looking out at the Sangre de Cristo Mountains glowing red in the sunset. They would talk about their day, their dreams, their gratitude for the life they had built. "Do you ever think about Stillwater Ridge?" Kieran asked one evening when Samuel was about 2 years old. Willa considered the question. "Sometimes," she admitted. "I think about Sarah, the deputy who let me go. I hope she is all right. And I think about what my life would have been if I had not run, if I had not collapsed in the desert where you found me. It is like thinking about a different person, a different world." "Do you have any regrets?" Kieran asked, taking her hand. "Not a single one," Willa said firmly. "Everything I went through led me to you, to Samuel, to this life. I would do it all again if it meant ending up here." Kieran kissed her hand. "This town treated you like royalty, just like I promised," Willa laughed. "You said it might not be exactly like royalty." "I think it is better," Kieran said. "Royalty is about being above people. What you have here is something better. You are part of a community that values you. You are respected and loved. That is worth more than any crown." In the fall of 1879, Willa discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because she knew what to expect. She continued her work keeping books for local businesses, bringing in steady income that allowed them to save. Kieran had expanded the livery, adding more stalls and offering wagon repair services. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable and secure. Their daughter was born in April of 1880 on a beautiful spring morning when the wildflowers were just beginning to bloom in the valley. They named her Rose Patricia Quade, after the flowers and Mrs. Henderson, who had been like a mother to Willa. Rose had Willa's blue eyes and Kieran's smile, and Samuel, now 3, was fascinated by his baby sister. Life settled into a new rhythm with 2 children. The house felt full and alive with the sounds of family. Samuel's questions and Rose's cries, Kieran's laughter and Willa's singing, all blended into a symphony of domestic happiness. As the years passed, the town of Westcliffe continued to grow and prosper. The railroad came through in 1881, bringing new commerce and new settlers. The school expanded, adding more teachers and grades. Margaret Holloway's newspaper became a daily publication. The town council, now including 2 women, implemented progressive policies that made Westcliffe known throughout Colorado as a model community. Kieran and Willa grew with the town. Kieran eventually bought the livery stable outright when Mr. Carson passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1882. Willa began teaching mathematics to older students at the school, her gift for numbers finally finding an outlet. Their children thrived, Samuel showing an early talent for working with animals like his father, Rose demonstrating her mother's quick mind and love of learning. In the summer of 1885, when Samuel was 8 and Rose was 5, the family took a trip up into the mountains for a camping expedition. Kieran had been promising the adventure for months, and the children were wild with excitement. They rode on horseback, Samuel confident in the saddle already, Rose riding with Willa. They made camp near a mountain lake so clear you could see fish swimming in its depths. Kieran taught Samuel to fish while Willa and Rose gathered wildflowers and explored the shore. That evening, sitting around the campfire under a sky dense with stars, Samuel asked the question Willa had been half expecting for years. "Papa, Mama, how did you meet?" Willa and Kieran exchanged glances. They had agreed long ago that they would tell their children the truth when the time was right. Samuel was old enough now to understand. "It is quite a story," Kieran began. "Your mother was very brave, and she went on a big adventure before we met." Together, they told the story, simplifying it for the children but keeping the essential truth. They explained that Willa had been accused of something she did not do, that she had to run away to stay safe, and that Kieran had found her and brought her to Westcliffe where she could start a new life. "Were you scared, Mama?" Rose asked, her eyes wide. "Very scared," Willa admitted. "But your father helped me, and then the people of Westcliffe helped me, and I learned that even when bad things happen, good people can make everything better." "You are a hero, Mama," Samuel said seriously. "And you too, Papa. We are just 2 people who found each other when we both needed someone," Kieran said, pulling Willa close. "And that made all the difference." The years continued to unfold with the usual mix of joy and challenge that makes up a life. There were hard winters when money was tight, summers when drought threatened the valley, illnesses that frightened them and losses that grieved them. Mrs. Henderson passed away peacefully in 1887, leaving her boarding house to Anna, the school teacher who had become like a daughter to her. Willa and Kieran mourned her deeply, grateful for all she had done for them, but there were also years of abundance and celebration. The livery business prospered enough that Kieran hired 2 assistants, allowing him more time with his family. Willa became the head of mathematics at the school, respected throughout the region for her teaching methods. Samuel, as he grew into a young man, showed interest in becoming a veterinarian, and Kieran and Willa saved diligently to send him to college. Rose proved to be gifted at writing, contributing pieces to Margaret Holloway's newspaper from the age of 14. Through it all, Kieran and Willa's love deepened and matured. The passion of their early days evolved into something richer, a partnership built on mutual respect, shared experiences, and unwavering commitment. They still went on walks together whenever they could, still talked for hours, still kissed goodnight every evening without fail. On their 20th wedding anniversary in 1896, Kieran arranged a surprise. He took Willa back to the place where he had found her all those years ago. The land had changed, with more homesteads dotting the landscape, but the essential character remained the same, endless grassland rolling toward distant mountains. "I wanted to bring you here," Kieran explained as they stood looking out over the plains, because this is where everything began. This is where I found the greatest treasure of my life. I was half dead and covered in dust, Willa said, laughing through tears. Not much of a treasure. You were everything, Kieran insisted. From that first moment, even though I did not realize it yet, you were everything. Do you remember what you told me about Westcliffe? Willa asked. You said, this town will treat you like royalty. You were right. But what you did not tell me was that I would find you there, that I would build a family there, that I would find not just safety but joy. They stood together in silence, hands clasped, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. 20 years of marriage, 2 beautiful children, a home and a community they loved. The girl who had fled a cruel town and the cowboy who had found her had built something remarkable. I love you, Willa Quade, Kieran said, more with each passing year. I love you, Kieran Quade, Willa replied, forever. By the turn of the century, Westcliffe had become a true town, with electricity coming in 1898 and the first automobiles appearing on the streets by 1900. Samuel had gone off to Colorado Agricultural College, returning during summers to work at the livery and apply his growing veterinary knowledge. Rose had been accepted to the University of Colorado, planning to study journalism. Kieran and Willa, now in their mid-40s, found themselves adjusting to being empty nesters. The house felt quiet without the constant motion of children, but they discovered they enjoyed having time to themselves again, rediscovering aspects of their relationship that had been set aside during the busy years of child-rearing. They took more trips into the mountains, sometimes camping, sometimes just riding out for the day. Kieran taught Willa to play the harmonica, and though she never quite mastered it, they laughed together at her efforts. Willa convinced Kieran to attend the theater performances that traveling companies occasionally brought to Westcliffe, and he discovered he enjoyed the drama more than he expected. In 1903, Samuel graduated from college and returned to Westcliffe to establish a veterinary practice. He married a young woman named Elizabeth, a teacher he had met at school, and they settled into a house just 2 streets away from Kieran and Willa. When they had their first child in 1904, a boy they named Kieran after his grandfather, Willa and Kieran stepped joyfully into the role of grandparents. Rose, having graduated with honors from the University of Colorado, took a position at the Denver Post, but came home frequently to visit. She remained unmarried by choice, devoted to her career, and Willa and Kieran supported her decision, proud of the independent, thoughtful woman she had become. As Kieran and Willa entered their 50s, they began to think about their legacy. The livery business, though still successful, was beginning to face competition from the automobile. Rather than fight the inevitable, Kieran adapted, gradually transitioning to automobile repair while maintaining some horse care for the ranchers who still relied on traditional transportation. Willa continued teaching, but she also began writing down her story. She wanted her grandchildren and their grandchildren to know where they came from, to understand that everyone deserves a second chance, that courage and love can overcome terrible circumstances. On a warm evening in June 1910, Kieran and Willa celebrated their 34th wedding anniversary. Their children and grandchildren gathered at their house, now expanded over the years to include multiple rooms and a large porch. Samuel and Elizabeth brought their 3 children, including young Kieran, now 6, his sister Margaret, 4, and baby Thomas, just 1. Rose had come from Denver, bringing her latest published article to share. After dinner, as the family relaxed on the porch watching the mountains turn red with sunset, Samuel proposed a toast. "To my parents," he said, raising his glass. Who taught us that love is not just a feeling but a choice you make every day? Who showed us that building a good life takes courage, work, and commitment? Who gave us a home filled with laughter and security? Thank you for everything. Hear, hear, Rose added. And thank you, Mama, for teaching me that a woman can be anything she wants to be. You escaped an impossible situation, built a new life, became a respected teacher, and raised 2 children who adore you. You are my hero. Willa felt tears streaming down her face as her children spoke. Kieran's arm came around her shoulders, pulling her close. The real toast should be to this town, Kieran said. To Westcliffe, which welcomed us, supported us, and gave us the foundation to build this family. To the community that treated us like royalty, which, as I have always said, is not about being above people but about being valued and loved. We are blessed to live here. To Westcliffe, everyone chorused, glasses clinking. As the evening wore on and the children grew sleepy, as Samuel and Elizabeth gathered their family to head home and Rose retreated to her old room for the night, Kieran and Willa remained on the porch, alone together as they had been so many evenings over the past 34 years. We did all right, did we not? Kieran said softly. We did better than all right, Willa replied. We built something beautiful. She thought back to that terrified girl fleeing through the desert, certain she was going to die alone and unmourned. She thought about the moment she woke in Kieran's tent, seeing kindness in a stranger's eyes. She thought about every step of the journey that had brought her here, to this porch, this family, this love. Do you think there is a family living in Stillwater Ridge right now? She mused. With a daughter being falsely accused, a person who needs to escape. Probably, Kieran said. There are always cruel towns and people who abuse power. I hope they run, Willa said fiercely. I hope they find their way to somewhere like Westcliffe, somewhere that will give them a chance. I hope they meet someone like you, someone who will see their worth when they cannot see it themselves. Maybe that is why you should finish writing your story, Kieran suggested. So people know that escape is possible, that new beginnings are real, that love can find you even when you have given up hope. Maybe, Willa agreed. They sat in comfortable silence, holding hands, listening to the night sounds of Westcliffe settling into sleep. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new joys. Samuel's veterinary practice was growing, requiring more of his time. Rose was considering taking a position with a newspaper in New York, which would mean seeing her less often. The grandchildren were growing so fast, changing every day. But tonight, this moment, was perfect. Kieran and Willa had been given the gift of building a life together, of raising children who were good people, of finding their place in a community that valued them. They had taken tragedy and transformation and turned it into something lasting and beautiful. As the stars emerged overhead, brilliant and infinite, Willa rested her head on Kieran's shoulder and felt profound gratitude wash over her. She had fled a cruel town. A cowboy had found her, and Westcliffe, Colorado, had treated her like royalty, but better than royalty. It had treated her like family. The years continued to pass, as years do. Kieran and Willa grew older, their hair turning silver, their steps slower but their love unwavering. In 1915, they celebrated their 40th anniversary, surrounded by their expanding family. Samuel now had 5 children, and Rose, having met a fellow journalist in New York, had married at 37 and was expecting her first child. The world changed around them. The automobile became commonplace. Electricity reached even remote ranches. The telephone connected people across vast distances. The Great War in Europe brought anxiety to the small town, though most of Westcliffe's young men were spared from service due to their essential agricultural roles. Through it all, Kieran and Willa remained each other's constant. When Kieran's health began to fail in his late 60s, the result of a lifetime of hard physical labor, Willa nursed him with the same devotion he had shown her when he found her in the desert. When Willa struggled with failing eyesight in her mid-60s, making it difficult to continue teaching, Kieran rode to her every evening, helping her maintain her connection to the world of ideas and learning. They had long conversations about their lives, revisiting memories and marveling at how everything had unfolded. They talked about the choices that had brought them together, the risks they had taken, the grace they had received. "If I could go back," Willa said one evening when they were both in their early 70s, "knowing everything I know now, I would not change a single thing. Every hardship was worth it to get here to have this life with you." "Even Stillwater Ridge?" Kieran asked. "Even the accusation and the fear, even that," Willa confirmed. "Because it set me on the path to you, and you are worth everything." On a crisp October morning in 1928, just a few days after their 52nd wedding anniversary, Kieran passed away peacefully in his sleep, Willa holding his hand. He was 73 years old, and he had lived a life filled with purpose, love, and meaning. The entire town of Westcliffe mourned him. The funeral service, held in the now much larger church, overflowed with people whose lives he had touched. Samuel delivered a eulogy that celebrated his father's decency, his work ethic, his devotion to family and community. Rose read a poem she had written about the cowboy who had saved her mother, and in doing so, given Rose and Samuel the gift of life. Willa stood at the grave, supported by her children and grandchildren, and said goodbye to the man who had been the other half of her soul for more than half a century. She grieved deeply, but she did not despair. How could she, when she had been given such a gift? 52 years of love, partnership, and joy. 2 wonderful children, 8 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren on the way. A legacy that would continue long after she was gone. She lived for 6 more years, staying in the house she and Kieran had shared, surrounded by memories and family. She finished writing her story, a full account of her flight from Stillwater Ridge, her rescue by Kieran, and the beautiful life they had built in Westcliffe. Rose helped her edit and publish it as a small book, which sold modestly but touched everyone who read it. Willa spent her final years watching her grandchildren grow into adults, holding her great-grandchildren, and dispensing the hard-won wisdom of 8 decades of life. She told anyone who would listen about Westcliffe, about the importance of community, about the transformative power of compassion and second chances. On a quiet morning in March 1934, Willa passed away in her sleep, just as Kieran had. She was 80 years old. Her family gathered to mourn and celebrate her, remembering the strength and love she had shown throughout her remarkable life. They buried her beside Kieran in the Westcliffe Cemetery, under the shadow of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains that glowed red each evening, just as they had when she first arrived in this valley 58 years earlier. The headstone was simple, listing her name, her dates, and a single line she had requested. She fled cruelty and found love. Years passed, and Westcliffe continued to grow and evolve. The story of Kieran and Willa Quade became part of the town's folklore, passed down through generations as an example of courage, compassion, and enduring love. The house they had shared was eventually designated a historical landmark, preserved as a reminder of the town's commitment to justice and second chances. Samuel's veterinary practice was passed down to his son, then to his grandson, maintaining the Quade family's presence in Westcliffe for over a century. Rose's descendants included journalists, teachers, and activists who carried on her commitment to truth and advocacy for the vulnerable. And somewhere, in the records of Stillwater Ridge, Colorado, if anyone bothered to look, there was a forgotten warrant for the arrest of Willa Zimmerman on charges of theft. But Willa Zimmerman was long gone, transformed into Willa Quade, a woman who had fled a cruel town, been saved by a cowboy, and found that Westcliffe treated her not like royalty but like something better, like a beloved member of a community built on fairness, compassion, and mutual respect. Her story lived on, inspiring anyone who heard it to believe that new beginnings are possible, that love can find us in the most unexpected places, and that courage combined with compassion can build a legacy that lasts for generations. The girl who collapsed in the desert became a woman who built a family. A cowboy with a dream found something better than he imagined. And together, they proved that home is not just a place but a choice to love and be loved, to build and to belong, to transform tragedy into triumph through the simple but profound act of showing up for each other every single day.